I was born in this system. My mother was born in this system. I can take a white friend of mine. He was born in this system. His parents was born in this system. But, you know, the system was geared in his favor, unfavorable for me.
The sharp division of people into two main groups.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
I said, please don't be too nice.
Said, harassment, I'll show you harassment.
This is your police department in review.
We cannot settle for anything less than transformative structural change.
Let me explain from my perspective what systemic racism and white privilege is, you know. So systemic racism, figuratively, is P on the black race. You know, it's a system comprised of policies, practices, and procedures that is done with discretion and is done extremely strategically to keep people of color, particularly the black race, at a disadvantage. If you take any of your Caucasian friends or colleagues and you hold up your hand and you ask them questions, for example, if I was to say, have you ever been denied a business loan because of the color of your skin? And more than likely, the black person is going to have a finger down. You take a finger down for every question that you can answer. Have you ever been the subject of predatory lending because of the color of your skin? Have you ever been denied a promotion or a job because of the color of your skin? Have you ever made less than your colleague because of the color of your skin? Have you ever been profiled by the police because of the color of your skin? So, and what's left is just this. And for black people, this is all that we have. And this is a symbol of power. It's a symbol of unity, equivalent to just Black Lives Matter. So yes, all lives does matter, but the black race is in a state of seclusion, is in a state of isolation. Therefore, all lives can't matter if we have a percentage of all lives being put in isolation and not reaping the same benefits of all lives. So I think as white America and other races, the best they can do, because right now we living in a racially charged society. White race right now, they can respect this, promote Black Lives Matter, because contrary to this is chaos. It's America's worst nightmare. That's one solution. That's just a suggestion I have to, you know, when people say all lives matter. You know, so when we start discussing racism in America, you have two sides. You have your conscious racists, then you have your unconscious racists. Your conscious racist is someone that they look at you and they just overly consumed with hate. They just hate everything. They hate your culture. They hate the melanin. They just consume with hate. Then you have your unconscious racists, where no, they may not think they're racist, they may not, but they reap the benefits of a systemic racist society. I can give you an example. I knew a woman who criticized me and other black people for how we communicate. Now, who's to say the way that I communicate is better or less effective than a white person? You know, an example is a black person from a certain environment may say the word ax instead of ask. So therefore, because how we communicate, she devalued us, devalued our opinion, and perceived us to communicate less effective than her. Therefore, we were declined membership to a particular investment group that was predominantly white. You know, that's an example of the unconscious racist. So in America now, you're seeing a melting pot of both of these, and now it's gotten to a point where the minority, the ones that been beaten down and had to deal with all of this, it's an uprising. And until that can be, well, it's been identified, but I think white America have to make a conscious effort to identify when there is systemic racism being displayed, and make a mental note like, whoa, hold on. I need to step back, and how can I effectively correct this? I was born in this system. My mother was born in this system. I can take a white friend of mine. He was born in this system. His parents was born in this system. But, you know, the system was geared in his favor, unfavorable for me, you know. So I've learned not everyone is like me, you know. So when you see kids looting and rioting and all that anarchy in the street, that's the opposite of this, you know, because they're not at a point where they can articulate their frustration. And this and the BLM movement isn't thoroughly being respected, you know. So the opposite of this is America's worst nightmare. And then you're going to get chaos, then you're going to get anarchy, you know. So I've endured this system my whole life, and I've learned how to navigate and make a way for myself and my family. There's others, they haven't reached that point yet, so they're frustrated. I can give you an example. I used to be a teacher, so if I'm trying to teach a kid who's dealing with a lot of social ills, or not even say me, let's say if I have, because in a lot of inner city schools, it's predominantly Caucasian female teachers. So let's say she's trying to teach this young black kid, he's dealing with a lot of social ills. She's trying to teach him algebra. Yet this kid is dealing with a lot of social ills at home. He can barely multiply. So he's unable to understand how to do this algebra. His brain is just not conceptualizing and being able to digest what this teacher is trying to instruct him. So you know what he does? He acts out. His behavior becomes very defiant. He disrupts the class, you know. So that's what you're seeing now in young black America now. You know, they're fed up with a system that has been put in place to keep them at a disadvantage. But they just haven't gotten to the point. I can sit here today and express to you what the problem is, what the cause is, what the effect is, but they're not at that point yet. It's just like, so they're just a few years out the womb, fresh into this system. So they haven't actually been able to sit back and study it the way that I have. So I've been in this system, you know, there's numerous times. You know, I gave you the example of the woman that, you know, who unbiasedly discriminated against us because how we communicate. I went to a historically black university for undergrad. For graduate school, I went to a predominantly white university. The differences are incomparable. There were studies and courses put in place at the historically black school for me to advance. When I went to a predominantly, even though it was at the graduate level, however, I interacted with people at the undergrad level. Is either you adapt or you don't. You know, you will sink. Whereas the historically black university, there's things, because I'm coming from a total different environment and going into a college setting, you know. Whereas in a predominantly white university, there's not things in place set up for you to prevail and to succeed. You just gotta want it and you go. Whereas I know that I acknowledged this at my undergrad, which, you know, the historically black university, there was a lot of programs, courses in place there set up so that I can prevail and be able to navigate and integrate into today's society, you know, and I appreciate that. And that's something that I truly value. So I know I can name numerous situations where there was a demonstration that exemplifies systemic racism. The criminal justice system is a system that's set up for blacks to fail and falter on. The education system is a system set up for blacks to fall and to fail. the financial system, housing, so all of these systems, which we have to adapt to, and we as part of our livelihood, are all set up, with obstacles for minorities to overcome, So when someone says a black person can never be racist, because we don't run the systems. We don't formulate the systems that American functions on. In all of these systems, the blacks have very little power. When you look at criminal justice systems. So right now in our executive branch of government, there's very little power that's really who empathizes with the needs of minorities, of people of color. So we have very little power. A perfect example is when you look at the data of different groups, the educated, black women are the most educated group out of black men, white men, Hispanic men. Black women are the most educated, but yet we still have very little power in a lot of these systems. So, the difference is, with black power, that power comes from within. That power is a result of being oppressed. That power is a result of being in isolation. So, we gotta have power, within ourselves. That power enables me to look at you and be able to judge you by the content of your character versus automatically thinking like, there may be some aggression towards me because of the color of my skin. So that power enables me to not reciprocate hate when I'm faced with it, So, however, the powers that oils and moves this country, blacks have very little. So that's why when I say blacks can never be racist, we have very little power to really, to function this country. When you start looking at the educational system, when you start looking at the criminal justice system, when you start looking at the banking and the housing, there's years and years and years and years of equivocal stipulations put in place just to keep people of color at a disadvantage. So when it comes to into that sense, we have little power, So, and when you see these kids acting out, looting and rioting, that's just the frustration because they have very little power, That's like if you in a relationship with someone and they feel insignificant and they feel like they inferior because that's what you projected to them, they're gonna act out. There's gonna be some static in the relationship, So now that's where we at in America now. There's a lot of static amongst the different classes, the different ethnic groups of people. I've encountered a lot of obstacles in my path to where I'm at now. I grew up in Philadelphia and, I seen racism, conscious racism, 5 years old, kindergarten, Italian and Irish will wait outside of the schoolyard to throw stuff at us and to chase us back to our black neighborhoods. I've learned at a really early age the divinity between and separation with race. It was, wasn't shown from home, so I don't have hate. I've learned, not to hate from my home, but out in the society, I realized I'm looked upon and discriminated upon because of my color of my skin. So, for me personally, it's just been defined, it goes with self-love. You have to love yourself. If you see someone else that looks like me and more than likely, they dealing with the same struggles or they're facing the same challenges as me. So why not have that unity? Why not have that camaraderie? Because collectively, that's just a basic principle with whatever you're trying to accomplish. You can get more done when you do it collectively versus me trying to do it in solitude. I've learned to just instill, have that self-love, that sense of God within me, and that enables me to keep going, to not be able to take things personal. rather look at the circumstances of that person, So if I'm faced with conscious racism, I got to make the effort within me. I got to use that power in me not to reciprocate that, But there's someone up in Berry Hill where they might not have that level of power like me. And that's when I say America's nightmare, that's the opposite of the BLM and the Black Power, when you see that black fist. So, but I've been able to instill a certain level of self-love within myself to keep going and understand that, this person, okay, they're just oblivious to the systems, they're oblivious to what's going on. They don't know no better. But that doesn't mean I'm going to succumb to their ignorance. Michelle Obama once said, when they go low, we just got to go higher. And so that power for me to be able to brace that and to conceptualize that has assisted me to prevail and to overcome a lot of the systemic racism, which we have little power. Now, when you mention that power where that's within the systems, that's one of my ultimate goals, to be in a place of power so that I can put other minorities in a position so that they can relinquish power to other minorities. That's one of my ultimate goals. So, I'm not there yet. So all I can do is just what I'm doing right now is expressing my opinion, expressing my concerns, talking to I talk to Black America, a lot, but expressing my concerns and the challenges that Black people face to white America, and and they can assist and supplement the challenges that we have faced as well. It's their fight just as much as it is ours, because we're all living in this one system. But you got some people who they don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose that privilege. So they're not. They're going to say anything. But there's some who they have power within themselves to distinguish what's right and wrong. I had a friend of mine, just to give you an example of that, I had a friend of mine who's a nurse. She worked at a hospital in Philadelphia, and two co-workers were, said some hateful things about a Black, another colleague of theirs. Now, I know people, some white individuals who would have ignored it and would have just sat there and not said anything because they don't want to lose their privilege. But then there's someone like my friend, no, she spoke up. And she, from that point on, she disconnected herself from them, So she had the power to say, like, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. But then you have this other person, they don't want to lose because they're part of that system of power and of benefits. They don't want to relinquish. And, Black people are not really getting a seat at the table when it comes to that type of power. We're not, like I said, Black women are the most educated, group of people in this country. But we're still not getting a lot of seats at the table. So, that's the disparity. And then when you start looking at the numbers as far as, the unemployment, the household income, there's a big disparity between, whites and Blacks. And why is that? It's because the systems that are in place. Like I had to overcome a lot. But, with the grace of God, that helped me get that power and realize that I'm still, despite me not having a seat at the table, despite me living in a racist system and having to adore it and learn how to navigate that, I still was able to navigate and overcome that just by having that belief system. And so, and for a lot of Blacks, they have that. So, and then one thing I tell my kids, if you believe it, you can achieve it. So despite what the situation is, despite the minute that you give up hope, you fail, you lose. And I'll be honest with you, my kids, they gonna have to endure this racist system. because it's not, when you look at our government, there's been a lot of conservative judges over 200 put in place, and they'll be there for a few years. The best thing I can tell my kids is to make sure you understand, you utilize that power that I've had. I've multiplied it with them. They getting a better start than me. I started in the gutter. They're not being raised in the same environment as me. They're growing up in a more diverse environment. I grew up in a predominantly black environment, and I didn't really feel the racism until I got into corporate America. And then I started to just take, I was too young, too immature to really express whoa, that wasn't right. Something, you feel it, but you don't know. So, coming from that environment, your first reaction is to give that person exactly what you feeling, to just, whether it's violence, whether it's just, you want to, that's just immature thinking, and I teach my kids how to channel that energy, how to have self-control. When you're feeling like that, you got to question yourself. So that goes back to that power. You got to have the power to control yourself, to control your emotions, and realize it becomes about you depending on how you react. It's more about that person. If that person has bigoted views towards you, it says nothing up, because you're still great. You still are a consumption of a lot of power, of a lot of love. So you have to, but if you react in a negative way, then it becomes about you. So these are some of the principles that I instill in my kids, is that you have to have a high level of self-love, because there's going to be a lot of people in situations that's going to try to take from out of your, from your cup. And it got to be overflowing with that power. You have to have the power of self. You have to know who you are. You have to know what your heritage is, and understand that regardless of how the predominant race of people may view you, or how they may put obstacles in your path, you have the power to overcome all of that. A lot of our youth don't have that hope, but I make sure that my children have that hope, and they have that understanding that you can overcome. Yeah, they may have the power, literally, and be able to put these obstacles in place, but you have the power to bat down, to jump over, to outrun any obstacles that is put in your path. So that's because they're gonna grow up in this type of society. My grandchildren, hopefully they don't. I didn't understand the power of the judicial branch of government until, I'll be honest, 15 years ago. And I understand the power of that, of how to vote, and and researching and evaluating the people you put in these political positions at the local level, and how important that is, and how that affects your day-to-day life. I understand that now, but 18, 19, I didn't, because I was still a product of my environment, and then I started to make this transition to the person you see today. And the person I am today, I'm able to provide my kids something that wasn't provided to me. And that's for them to have that power, to have that self-pride, and never feel bad of being and representing who they're destined to be, and who they are.